When someone says the word evangelism, different ideas and thoughts come into our mind. So I was asked to start off with just a review of like what is evangelism, which is kind of a broad question. And so I can tell you that even in mission-focused church or whatever we're supposed to call our churches or not call our churches or whatever it may be, even in our church, evangelism is like one of those like it's one of those taboo words. Like there's people in the congregation who are happy to hear it, and then there's people in the congregation who are not happy to hear it. And there's if I do like a series at church about evangelism, there are people who regularly attend who will purposefully get up and leave before the sermon starts because they really don't want to hear what's being said. So and some of these are dear friends to me. So it's not personal, or at least I don't think it is. Maybe I'm naive, but an uneasy laugh in the audience, right? He's on to us, right? And so I've approached some of them and said, you know what, we're like very honest and frank with each other. What's up? Like, what's up with like the non-desire for evangelism? Yet, like, I come from Toronto, where and I'm sort of like in sort of the dead center, like I'm in downtown. So within an hour's drive in any radius, sort of east, north, and west, south is the lake. So there aren't any churches there. There's like 25 churches, and you choose to come here. Some people drive past 3 or 4 churches to come to our church. So, and we're mission focused. And every time I say evangelism, it's almost like I slapped you in the face. So what's up with that, right? And I get frequently the same thing. So in New York City, y'all have Times Square. Well, we have Dundas Square. So Dundas Square. It's at the corner of Yonge and Dundas in Toronto. It's not nearly as big or as it doesn't have nearly the energy that Times Square has. I know, I'm so sorry, Canadians. Don't stone me. But you will invariably find people of different faiths with megaphones shouting at everybody. Either, cursing them to hell, telling them how to get to heaven, giving them a Quran or a Jehovah's Witness Bible or Christians giving out New Testaments and all kinds of various things. And honestly, I don't know, but and we'll talk about this when we talk specifically about culture, but there's something about that is just, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't know if it's working or it's not working. We don't do a lot of that at our parish, and I'm not criticizing. In fact, there's this fellow in Toronto, his name is Sarko. Sarko stands at the northwest corner of Yonge and Dundas at this Canadian Times Square, Dundas Square. And he stands at that street corner right in front of, like, right at the little button that you press to ask the light to change. Of course, there's always people there 24/7, so that button does nothing, because everybody's pressing the button at all 4 different corners. Right, but anyway, he stands right there with tracts. You can see him his hand out. Rain or shine, this guy must be old enough to be my dad, right? And every few seconds he says, "Believe in the Lord Jesus," exactly like that, right? Believe in the Lord Jesus, all right? And people make fun of him all the time, and honestly, it really upset. I'm very humbled by this man. I have preached to a crowd in pouring rain once in my life, and I've gotten so much praise for it. I am certain there is no reward left for me in heaven from that one instance. This man gets ridiculed. I mean, he's really living the gospel. Like, people make fun of him. People hate him. People imitate him. People take the tracts out of his hand and tear them up in front of him, And I've lived in Toronto for 9 years. Sarko's still there, standing at the northwest corner of Yonge and Dundas, handing out these tracts. I don't know, and we'll talk in a future talk, or I'll talk about mission and vision and fruit and evangelism, and how should we feel about fruitfulness and all these kinds of things. But I honor this. I really honor this man. But I wonder if that is this evangelism. When I say evangelism in my church, my parish, a large proportion of people, the only thing they can associate it with is Sarko, and they're like, I'm not Sarko, right? And I don't know if that works, but everybody's making fun of him, so I don't think it's working. So I don't want to stand outside in like minus 40 Canadian weather doing something which doesn't work and get made fun of, right? And in a certain sense, I'm not sure that I blame them. Honestly, from all of my heart, I really honor this man, and I am certain that he is entering the kingdom long before me. So if we look up the word evangelism in the Bible, and we're like looking for some hints, like, okay, so what else could evangelism be if it's not Sarko? If we look it up and we look up the Greek word, and I haven't studied Greek, but if we look up the definition of the Greek word, it's a sweet-smelling fragrance, a sweet-smelling aroma, a fragrant or sweet-smelling thing, incense, an odor or something sweet-smelling, and so on. You can read as well as I can what's on the screen. Other usages: a sweet savor, something sweet-smelling, a sweet smell. So, and if we look at the usage in Scripture of this word that we commonly say as evangelism, we'll find that the word that we find commonly in Scripture is actually fragrance or sweet-smelling aroma. In 2 Corinthians 2:15, for we are to God the fragrance of Christ among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. In Ephesians 5:2, walk in love as Christ has also loved us and given himself for us, an offering, a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling aroma. In Philippians 4, indeed, I have all and abound. I am full and have received from Epaphroditus the things sent from you, a sweet-smelling aroma and an acceptable sacrifice, well-pleasing to God. The idea of sacrifice, it seems from these verses, and we'll look at a couple more, that it has a lot more to do with a sacrifice or a way of life than it does something that you say. One of my hobbies, like I'm not a theologian, so don't base anything theological on anything that you hear from me. But one of my hobbies is gender theology, and you'll find, like in language, for example, there are, like, for example, anybody here speak French or ever studied French or German or Italian, any of those languages, right? Anything other than English, right? So in all of those languages, you'll find that everything has a gender. So like a chair is female, it's la chaise, it's feminine, right? It's not female, it's feminine. There's a difference between the two, right? And when you start thinking about these things, you start asking yourself, like, is feminine or is that masculine? Well, is that feminine or is that masculine? But so feminine things are like, characterized, and notice there's a difference between female and feminine, but we won't get into that, are characterized by hospitality, are characterized by receiving, are characterized by nurturing. And again, men can have lots of these feminine traits. It goes all over, and all of them are, you find the perfection of all of these feminine and masculine traits in God himself. He is the perfection of hospitality, and certain persons of the Trinity might display certain traits more than less. Anyways, all of that, forget about all of that, right? Read it and hear it from a proper theologian, not from me. But evangelism in this context, in the context of these verses, is not something which is like outgoing, is not something which is like going out, changing the world, but very much something, it's a sweet smelling aroma, when my fathers put the first grains of incense in the censer, it doesn't, the scent of incense doesn't like fire across the room and like hit you like a blast of cold air in the face. It travels gently, quietly, slowly, silently through the room, and what happens, like what happens, it enters into your nostrils, without like, you may take like some big deep breath, but you may not. You might just be breathing normally, and it just quietly, silently enters into your nostrils, and something happens to your olfactory nerve, and and then some endorphins get released, and you just kind of feel good. You just kind of feel relaxed. People who have difficulty falling asleep, you know, um, insomnia and the initiation of sleep. One of the things that they oftentimes recommend to them is aromatherapy, and there's specific aromas that are actually helpful to help people get into a place where they're more ready to fall asleep. Just talking about this, I'm thinking I should totally try this with my toddler who never wants to go to sleep, right? Why didn't I think of this before? Right? And what do they recommend to them? Frankincense and myrrh, Funny, like the church has known these things and has been doing evening raising of incense to just get us into a place of quiet and calm. And has known these things from pre-Christian times, the morning and the evening offering in the temple, when the church has baptized that and glorified it, and morning and evening raising of incense, and medicine, and just kind of catching up, this gentle, quiet, silent, penetration of the entire room with a sweet smelling fragrance. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be bold. Wuna's going to talk to us about that and teach us about that. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be outgoing. If there's time, we can talk about the distinction between mission and evangelism. Is every evangelist a missionary? Is every missionary an evangelist? Are there missionaries who are not necessarily evangelists? Is that possible? And a distinction between the two, if it's necessary, or maybe we're just splitting hairs and making things up that don't need to be there. A beautiful example of a sweet-smelling aroma of intercessory prayer is Father Peshoy Camel, right? Someone who is able to be a gentle spirit in the world by gentleness, by kindness, by just raw, simple love. There are very few stories that have mostly not been corroborated by anyone of supernatural events associated with Father Peshoy Camel. Very different from, for example, the Saint Pope Carolus VI, right? But he is no less celebrated and loved and remembered and had an enormous impact in the world. Not a canonized saint like the great Saint Pope Carolus VI, but nonetheless, right? A sweet smelling aroma. This is, by the way, from Psalm 140, which is in the Compline Prayers, I'm sure you're all aware, and also is part of the prayers that the priest says, one of the very first prayers that the priest prays at the beginning of raising of incense silently. We look to Christ and we say to him, like, Lord, you are the sweet-smelling aroma. Like everything that we do and that we are and that we try to be is we're simply participating with you, Lord, in the offering of yourself. Evangelism is sort of like a form of sharing. One of my favorite quotes about evangelism, although, Evagrius of Pontus is a, interesting character, questionable in history, but nonetheless, he must have said some good things, and this is probably one of them. Evangelism is one beggar saying to another, hey, I know where I can find bread. Friend of mine from church, one of the people actually who has this allergy to the word evangelism, this anaphylactic reaction to the word evangelism, calls me up one day. He never calls me, just only texts me, right? So he calls me one day. So I'm like, this has got to be really important. So he calls me. He says, "Hey, did you see that ad from TD, a big bank in Canada?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "If you go and open just like a checking account with them, they'll give you an iPad." This was like a few years ago. I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "There's got to be like some hook, some bait, some something." He's like, "No, really, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, great. Like, let me see, right?" And so I had like, 20 minutes before I had to be where I was going next. So I figured, let me just zip by the bank, since I actually have time and I'm actually not late. So I stop and I asked, and they're like, "Yeah, fill out these 17 million forms and da-da-da," and so on. So I said, "Okay, sure. Like, I'll come back at a time when I have time to fill out 17 million forms." But then I couldn't help, when I was done what I had to do that day, calling him back and saying, "Hey, you know how excited you were to call me and tell me about this? Tell me one other thing in your life that you would be as excited to call somebody and tell them about." And there was like some silence on the phone, right? And then I said, "Yeah, have a good night." Right? I didn't want to embarrass him. Later on, he asked me what that was about, and I told him that's what evangelism has to be. Like, whether I'm here because like Abuna Matthias twisted my arm and totally guilted me into this, and then Eric hounded me incessantly, and then I I made up every excuse in the book, and I'm finally was dragged here, like kicking and screaming, or whether like I look like I really want to be here. I really look like I'm really talking about something that I'm really passionate about. You can tell the difference. People have a really, really good phony meter. They really do. And I know this is going to sound so ridiculous. You're going to be wondering why you're standing and listening to me. If I only realized this in my first year of priesthood, like I should have realized this the day I became a Christian. But think about this. Like, you can't tell people about Jesus by lying to them. There can be no form of deception in trying to introduce people to the truth. Like, I know that sounds obvious, but many times we're like, okay, we're going to do this outreach activity, but we're not really going to tell people that we're from the church. Or we don't want to turn people off. We don't want to scare them. We don't want to, and we're just going to hand out these tracts. And when people ask these flyers or these brochures, and when people ask us what they are, we're just going to say something interesting for you to think about. Or, yeah, I mean, it is something interesting for you, and it's not necessarily a lie, but like, I mean, my friend who calls me up about this TD offer to get a free iPad, or he had no shame. He's an incredibly wealthy person, so he might have said like he might be ashamed to he doesn't need yet another like a 16th iPad. You know what I mean? Like, so what? But he wasn't. He was excited to tell me about something he was genuinely excited about. I honestly, as I was going through customs, like the only country in the universe that you have to go through customs in before you arrive in that country is the U.S. But that's not what we're here to talk about. But anyways, right. So I'm going through customs, and I was asking myself, like, I was honestly asking myself, are you excited? I think we have to ask ourselves that question, and then I asked myself, what else are you excited about? What excites you? I want to share with you, in line with sharing, I want to share with you my favorite quote in regards to evangelism. It's found in this book called Speaking the Truth in Love, edited by Father Thomas Hopko of blessed memory. This is in the introduction on page 18. It says, "Men and women who are truly theologically and spiritually educated reveal a boldness born of humility, a confidence tempered by tentativeness, a speech generated by silence, an apology inspired by charity, They know how to live with ambiguity as they give with meekness and gentleness an account for the hope that is in them. They speak the truth in love, with an enlightened zeal that prevents them from replacing God's righteousness with the righteousness of their own. They resist premature closure of complex issues and superficial answers to complicated questions. They evangelize without seeking to convert. They witness without seeking to win. They teach without desiring to dominate. They testify to truths in which they delight and find life, whatever the cost of their convictions, because they simply cannot do otherwise. And they have infinite respect for everyone and everything. Now I'm going to hand the floor over to you all and ask you to share with us what you particularly liked, what you didn't, what you thought made sense, what you didn't, and so on.
There was something about ambiguity. I think they evangelize without seeking. They know how to live with ambiguity as they give with meekness and gentleness. I think sometimes we're scared because we don't have all the answers, and there's things that maybe we're not sure how to explain. And but this is saying that there's something there. Sometimes there is an ambiguity, and we don't always have the answer, but that's still okay. We can still evangelize. We can still share the hope that is in us, even if we don't have all the answers.
Can I invite your graces to join us in the conversation? What do your graces do when you're faced with a situation or a question, and in your heart of hearts, deep in your soul, you have ambiguity in regards to this? You know, like, not to say it's not so much you don't know. I mean, maybe one doesn't know, but also maybe you've read on this profusely. You've read everything that anyone has to offer for you to read, and you still feel that the answer, if one is going to be honest, is unclear.
And I think the first thing is, like, there's a story in the Paradise of the Fathers in which St. Anthony the Great praised a man when he asked a bunch of disciples, "Do you understand this question?" And everyone tried to give their answer, and one said, "I did not know." And he praised him. His name was Abba Joseph, and he praised him, and he said, "Abba Joseph has learned the way to say, I don't know." So I think answering the question, knowing that I might not know the fullness, even if I've read or have not read, but if I don't know the question, I have to state that so the person's aware, and to express the complexity of the question. Depending on, I have to know, of course, who I'm speaking to. That's also very important, to know who I'm speaking to.
One part that I liked was speaking about how we shouldn't be replacing God's righteousness with our own righteousness. To remember that we are messengers. You know, we did not write the law. We did not create reality as it is. God is the one who created it. And we are coming to bring that message of truth, that we are not the author of truth. We are the messengers of truth to the people. And that we are not telling people our opinion about what I think is good and bad, right and wrong. I'm coming to declare what God has said is right and wrong, because He is the judge, and He is the one who has created the world in a certain way, and we are coming to let you know, like, this is you need to accept what we're saying because God has said so and so, and He is the creator of the universe, as opposed to me saying, I personally find your lifestyle distasteful. I personally think that your way and your opinions are bad, in which case we're making it more about my opinion rather than we're bringing this message from God Himself.
So it says, and they have infinite respect for everyone and everything. I thought that was great because, I mean, when there's a lack of respect, everything goes out the window. If you don't have respect for the person in front of you, they're not going to want to listen to you. And as Christians, sometimes, like when we're evangelizing, that goes out the window, and the people in front of us don't want to listen. And I just thought that was cool.
A really nice quote I read in the leadership world. It's not a religious thing. Was saying, but I think Saint Arsenius would probably give a standing ovation. Well, I mean, if he would break his silence for it, it would be, you win respect with your ears, you lose it with your mouth. You win respect with your ears, you lose it with your mouth. Frequently, in some of the different evangelism activities that we do in our parish, we frequently say most people are not willing to listen until they feel that they themselves have been heard. Most people are not willing to listen until they feel that they themselves have been heard.
I have a question. They resist premature closure of complex issues and superficial answers to complicated questions. I have a meaning in my mind, but I would like to get a better understanding of what that means, please.
Oh well, please tell us what you understood of that, because maybe I want to learn something.
There are a lot of wrongly assumptions of what Christ teaches, of what it means to be a Christian, and so on and so forth. How he the many words that are being used, love, judgment, and to leave it, to let others dictate what that is, and for us to not speak is probably a closure of a complex issue and complicated questions. But I might be wrong.
A lot of the times when we teach things to children, I have small children, and so a lot of times when we teach things to children, we try to simplify things to them. This is a good friend for you to have. Maybe we won't say that's a bad friend for you to have, but we'll try to maybe encourage them to play with the children that we think would be a good influence upon them, right? Is this person good and that person bad? Oh, it's far more complex than that, right? I'm not an eschatologist and an expert in the theology of the afterlife, but will this person go to heaven? Will that person go to hell? It's far deeper than that, But that person's not baptized. But Scripture says, unless you are baptized, you will not enter. It's we could spend the entire conference talking just about that one question, And then if it's not so simple, Abuna, then why did Jesus say it so simply? Or are you contradicting the teachings of Christ? Well, woe to me. No, obviously not. But is it, there's these things, and yes, when we have to, like, exactly like Sayyidina said, like, we have to know our audience, we have to know who's asking the question. We'll probably know that by listening to them first. And when somebody asks a question, you can answer the question with a question. Well, that's an excellent question. I actually really love that question. But hold on a second. Why are you asking me this question? Why are you asking me this question today? If it's a friend you've had for a long time. What do you understand of this question? If I was asking this question to you, how would you answer it? Those are all things that we can do to get other people to do the talking, one thing that I read about evangelism was saying you should never speak before you've let the other person speak for at least 5 minutes. You should never start to speak before you've been silent. There's been silence between you for at least 5 seconds, because that other person might stop speaking and then remember something else they want to say. And if you do that with some people, you'll never get to speak at all, right? Maybe that's all Christ wanted from you, was just to receive everything that they had with love, maybe, But it's tempting sometimes to answer any question with a simple answer when you know that there could be more there.